The gentleman from Florida now, Mr. Ross, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, panelists. I can only preface my remarks by thinking back to the early 1980s when I was installing computer systems, little 16-bit processors in pharmacies across the eastern United States, and we would use a dial-up modem to update their drug prices and to process data. And then at that time, the movie War Games came out, starring Matthew Broderick, that showed how we can hack into the Whopper, the intelligence computer that started a international war game, and we've evolved today to where you go to Walt Disney World and you get a magic band you wear that has all your data, shows Disney exactly where you are, what you're doing, what rides you want to be on, all your billing information. The evolution of technology has been a tremendous benefit to us. It has given us the path of expanding our commerce and our economy tremendously, and obviously it has given opportunities to those that seek ill will against us, and that's why we're here. One of the institutions of higher education, University of South Florida, rests in my district. And 2 years ago, they were designated by the Florida legislature to be the Center of Cybersecurity, an academic program where now they have over 100 students seeking masters in this particular arena. My question is there a great deal of cooperation between the private sector and the academic sector in trying to innovate ways to continue to fight cybersecurity? If anybody can address that.
I would just speak up and say I know that the retailers who have sought such partnerships have found welcome partnerships. And last year we established something called the Retail Cyber Intelligence Sharing Center. And at the core of that is a retail ISAC, but wrapped around that is an opportunity for educational opportunities. And I know that group has found great partners already in the academic community, looking for ways to identify ways to bring future chief intelligence security, information security officers up through the ranks, but also to share information so that everybody has the best skills available today.
Good. It would seem to me that that would be a good partnership, even though that I'd say well over 80% of our commerce in the cyber world is through the private sector. Mr. Dodge, let me ask you this particular question, because as my colleague Mr. Mulvaney was asking you about who bears the cost of a fraudulent transaction, is it between the banks and the retailers? Is there not in existence any particular either express or implied right of indemnification between the parties that would allow that to be resolved absent statutory or legislative involvement?
So the fraud payment requirements, who pays after a breach or in any instance of fraud, is spelled out in the contracts. So the retailers are bound by those contracts, and their unwillingness to, if they violate those contracts, they risk losing the right to accept cards.
So there's a limited negotiation, I guess, is what you're telling me, in order for retail. I mean, retailer wants to accept a MasterCard, they accept all the terms and conditions without really negotiation.
It's not a negotiation. You sign the contract presented to you. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Oxman, one of the things that we've talked about, and you talked about very well and in depth, is the EMV, the electronic MasterCard Visa chip. Now, for some time, this has been in practice in the European markets, has it not?
It has.
And just recently, had it not been for, I guess, an executive order, we would not be pursuing it as fast as we are in the United States. What has been the reason for the delay of the implementation of the chip technology here?
So the reason that chip technology is being deployed today in the United States, and it's been deployed already in Europe, is the following. In Europe, they don't have the ability that we have here to authorize a transaction online. When you swipe your card at the point of sale, what happens is that transaction is transmitted through a payment network to the card issuer for a yes or no answer. And when the receipt is spit out 1.4 seconds later with the yes answer, it's because that transaction was authorized and approved online.
I see.
In Europe, they don't have the infrastructure to do that. The card authorized the transaction.
I see.
Which means that chip with the swipe machine isn't going anywhere.
It's making the decision right there.
It's making the decision right there. And that's why the chip infrastructure is necessary in Europe and hasn't been necessary traditionally.
And now we move into tokenization, which is essentially protecting the database of all the private information, and it's encoding or encrypting that particular transaction with a one-time identification, and then that allows anybody who captures that to have really nothing.
That's exactly right. The way the system works today, in many cases, your actual account number is transmitted.
Right.
So what are cyber thieves looking for? They're looking for credit card numbers. Why do they breach retailers? Because there are tens of millions of them there. In a tokenized environment, it takes the actual account number out of the equation, so there's nothing to steal.
How fast are we moving in that direction? I mean,
we're moving in that direction very quickly.
So it's going to become the predominant barrier, if you will?
It is being ubiquitously deployed across all retail segments. Again, we have an existing infrastructure that needs to be replaced. It'll take some time to get there, but we will get there. It's a great technology, and everyone's working together to make it happen.
One last thing. I know we've talked about point-of-sale defenses predominantly today, but after the data has been breached and then the consumer's identity is stolen, how effective are some of these companies out there that's allegedly protect consumers from having their identity stolen? Is that good, or is it bad, or is it just somebody else's opportunity?
You know, I can't speak to any one of those companies. I think, again, everybody needs to be vigilant. You need to monitor yourself in addition to services you may provide. But I want to go back to a point you made a second ago, which is about advancing to the technology in cards to get to where we are in Europe and have been in Europe for a decade. The migration that's happening in the United States is only a half step. We're only instituting a chip. They're not requiring a PIN. A PIN authenticates the card holder, and we believe that there's a redundancy, there's a belt and suspenders approach to security that's needed in the cards. It's worked in Europe, it's worked in Canada, it's brought fraud down. And
so PIN and the chip eliminated almost?
Need to have it together, and we are not moving to that here in the United States because of decisions made by the card networks.
Thank you. I yield back.